Welcome to S2 TV. This is another series in Getting Ripped with Dr. Tiff, and today I want to address what I call the high day. You might have heard of it as a cheat day, a refeed day, a relaxed day, but for me it's just a high day because it's a higher intake than what you're typically eating in your baseline, and there's a lot of misunderstanding around, one, why we do this, the science behind it, and also the impact of this in terms of long-term weight, specifically fat loss. So I just want to run through a few quick points on why I advise clients to have a high day and when it's most beneficial in terms of the fat loss process. So first of all, I just want to talk about the psychological break that a high day gives you. There's so much energy and focus and consistency required to have a successful fat loss journey. And I'm not going to lie to anybody. It's not an easy process no matter what plan or program you're following, whether it's the S2 Nutrition or Paleo or Atkins or South Beach or whatever you're doing. It takes work. And it takes focus, and it can be mentally and physically draining at some level. So for me and for my clients, a high day provides them one day of the week, and for some of my clients even 2 days of the week, where they can relax a little bit more, where they can feel a little more freedom to add in some things that they can't fit into their budget through the week. Or if they do fit them into their budget through the week, it really makes it difficult for them to hit their numbers consistently. And so that's really one primary reason that I am an advocate of having that one higher day and eventually a day that maybe you don't even log at all through the week. And that is a strictly emotional and psychological component. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the science. Leptin levels. I bet most of you have never even heard of leptin, whereas 95% of you have probably heard of insulin. And what's interesting is those two work in tandem. Leptin is a hormone that is released by our adipose tissue, our fat cells. So the more fat cells and the larger our fat cells, the more leptin we release. Leptin regulates our metabolism, it regulates our energy expenditure, it regulates our hunger signals, and on a smaller scale, it regulates our mood and our brain functioning. So the more fat cells we have, the more insulin we release. So if you think about that, as you get leaner and leaner and you're in more of a caloric deficit, your body starts to release less and less of the hormone leptin. Now when that happens, our metabolic capacity slows, our metabolic efficiency increases, meaning we don't burn as many calories through the day because our body is telling us we don't need as much energy expenditure because our intake is lower and because we have less fat cells, so our body is more and more metabolically efficient. That really tricks our bodies too into mentally thinking that we're not as hungry, therefore we're not eating as much. So a lot of things are happening when the hypothalamus secretes this leptin from the fat cells and it enters into the body. On the flip side of that, if we're not in a calorie deficit, so again, leptin as it contributes to the obesity crisis, if we have so much fat and we're releasing so much leptin so consistently, there is such a thing as leptin resistance, just like insulin resistance, where our body stops responding to the excess fat, and thus we continue to store more and more fat. We continue to be hungry because our bodies aren't shutting off that mechanism. So there's two sides of that coin, but we're really talking about when we're in that fat loss mode, we're in a caloric deficit, and our bodies start to suppress the leptin volume in our bodies. So what happens when this occurs, it impacts so many other hormones as well. So as we get leaner and leaner and the leptin levels decrease, our metabolic capacity decreases. In men, you'll see decreased testosterone. And unfortunately, testosterone is one of the primary components in muscle development and overall performance, so it becomes harder and harder to gain lean mass. And for women, you see some disruptions to our reproductive hormones. Our menstrual cycle may be impacted. So long term and from an overall health standpoint, leptin levels can really impact a lot of other things, in addition to increasing cortisol levels, which is a catabolic hormone. So that's a potential for muscle loss or catabolism. So leptin is tied into all of those nutrients, all of those other components and hormones that impact the potential for fat loss. And as that metabolism slows and your body says, I'm good here, this is all the energy I need to expend, that last little bit of fat that you're trying to shed starts to get harder and harder to do. So when we can restore the metabolic capacity, when we can raise those leptin levels to kickstart our metabolism again and start it to process and allow the body to burn that last little bit of body fat, that is the key to the high day. That's the key to what bodybuilders or competitors call a refeed day, where they've been so calorically deficit, in such a caloric deficit that they need to infuse the carbohydrate and the glycogen into the liver and the muscles to help get the body processing energy again efficiently. In addition, that high day can help with just giving you a performance push. So again, a caloric deficit can often leave us a little lethargic, can impact our workouts because we're not getting the same amount of fuel as our body has been used to as we incrementally drop that intake. And so it gives us a chance to kind of carb load. And why is it the carbohydrate? Because the typical protocol for a high day is to increase carbs 100 to 150% above baseline. And then protein and fats really stay at baseline levels, keeping fats really around 10 to 20% of your overall intake. The reason being because carbohydrates, specifically sustainable lower glycemic load carbs, high fiber carbs, the same as you would want to add into your typical diet, are the ones that impact leptin levels the most drastically. So we're really focusing on that high day on carbohydrate increase. Protein and fats have not shown, in fact higher fat is shown to actually have the opposite impact on leptin levels. So it doesn't increase them, but it actually decreases them further. So really want on those high days or those refeed days to focus on increasing carbohydrate intake while keeping your other macros very consistent with what your baseline levels are. And the purpose again here is we're trying to drive those leptin levels up and get our metabolism humming again, so that we can go back into baseline and drop our food intake back down, but our metabolism has increased in capacity, and so it is freeing up the opportunity to burn fat again through the week. So if you're doing a high day, you can't just go out and binge on pizza and milkshakes and donuts, because that's going to drive your fat intake up as well. You need to think strategically, and sure, allow yourself some indulgences, but it might have to be a lower fat ice cream or a frozen yogurt, sweet CC's, that's one of our favorites here in Nashville. Somewhere where you can feel like you're having a bit of a psychological letdown, but you do have to be mindful of the fats. So if you're really up for that burger and fries, then just adjust the rest of your day, make the carbs fit, but you're really going to have to watch your fats the rest of your meals so that you leave room for that one higher fat meal that's really going to probably take up your baseline intake for the day. So science behind, and again, quick overview, but do your research on leptin. It's a little known hormone out there that has a huge impact on the potential for obesity, the prevention of obesity, but also the success of a fat loss program and how it relates to what we at StudiO2 call a high day. So I hope this helps you guys. If you don't have a high day yet and you're one of my clients, you got something to look forward to. I usually introduce it once we're in a pretty consistent flow with our numbers. So start hitting those numbers and you'll get to experience the high day. Thanks guys. See you next time.